I'm Becca Cantor. As many of you know, I'm Jewish Book Council's editorial director, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's meeting of Paper Brigade Short Story Club. As you might know, Paper Brigade is Jewish Book Council's annual literary journal, and at each meeting of our Short Story Club, we discuss a work of fiction that has been published in the journal. Today, this piece is an excerpt from the novel Furthermore, winner of the Paper Brigade Award for New Israeli Fiction in honor of Jane Weitz. We're thrilled to be joined by Furthermore's author, Miron C. and its translator, Joseph Faust. In addition to Miron and Joseph, I'm joined by Paper Brigade's executive editor, Carol Kaufman. The two of us will kick off the first half of today's meeting with some questions for Miron and Joseph, and then we'll invite everyone to jump in with their own questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can either raise your virtual hand or you can write your question in the chat. On the top right of your screen, you have the option of viewing the discussion in speaker or gallery mode, and I just suggest switching to speaker mode if you haven't already. I also just want to remind yourself to mute when you are not speaking. So the winning excerpt from Furthermore appears in the 2023 issue of Paper Brigade, and we're posting a link to purchase this issue in the chat. And just until midnight tonight, we're also offering you $5 off with the code SHORTSTORY23. It is now my pleasure to finally formally introduce our guests. Miron C. is an Israeli writer of poetry and novels and a professor of Hebrew literature at Bar Ilan University. He has been awarded the President's Prize, the Natan Yonatan Prize for Poetry, and the Brenner Prize for Poetry. Joseph Faust is an Israeli translator and editor. In addition to translating Furthermore, he's also translated another Miron C. novel, The Candidate. So Miron and Joseph, huge congratulations again. Thank you so much for being here today. I know it's already been a full day for you in Israel, so I fully appreciate it. How are you guys doing?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for us, an honor, and your initiative is very much respected by us, and we thank you very much for all what you are doing. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much, Miron. And back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot, really. You know, both the reward itself and being invited here. Just the fact that this kind of, the novel and its translation, even just the short excerpt that appeared, the fact that it interests and it intrigues people enough to have this meeting and kind of discuss it. That really means a lot. And thank you. It's really nice to do this.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. And definitely, I think that there's so much fascinating and amazing to discuss about this excerpt. So let's dive right in. I wonder if one of you could possibly start off by just summarizing this excerpt and then sort of explaining in a general way where the novel takes off from there. Either one of you can do.
Okay, Joseph, I would start. Is it okay? Yes. You can read this novel, I think, from few aspects point of view. It is being told by a young boy or a grown-up boy who is actually in many aspects more grown-up than many grown-up people. He's a very intelligent guy, also obsessive, and he's attracted by a very, very special man, Eitan, who operates a big crane. Now, I must admit that for years, when I walked in streets of Tel Aviv, and not only Tel Aviv, and in Israel, we have a lot of cranes because the state of Israel is being built all the time, never a break. And even when there is break, it's only break to Furthermore. And I was attracted by the work of the cranes and how it becomes something very real. On the other hand, I was fascinated from the potential danger that can come out of a crane. And I felt, I suppose, in a very weird way, that this crane can suddenly take me up and throw me away, who knows where. This combination of hoping to build things and to construct and have a new state, a new country, a new family, new everything. And on the other hand, the same crane can destroy, can throw people away, or also can try and fix the world, like the man here in this story, is a combination that I felt for many years. And through this book, I hope that the readers will feel it too. And Joseph, you will go on.
Okay, well, what we have, the excerpt that was published, is the beginning of the book. And I think we kind of just get the tip of the iceberg, like the introduction to Duty's character and to Eitan's character, and like the first few meetings between them. But this is before things really start to kick into high gear. I think it kind of ends at a pivotal, even though I think it was just kind of a coincidence. We were like, okay, it would be the first 20 pages or something, but it kind of ends up cutting off, I think, at a good point, because it takes place, like, I think maybe after the first time that, it's not the first time that Duty goes up to the crane and meets Eitan, but I think it's the first time that we really kind of start to see the danger of the things that Eitan does and that he's getting Duty involved in. And also Duty's parents who are like naturally apprehensive about all of this from the very start, but this is the first time that they really kind of dress him down and say, okay, this is really dangerous. You're not doing this anymore. So I think it's kind of in a nice way, even though it wasn't entirely deliberate, the excerpt kind of stops right when we start to feel things getting shaky and kind of dangerous. So it's a good, I think it leaves out the reader at a good point where they're kind of curious, okay, what's going to happen next? And like, how serious is this going to get?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you. And I think that you do a beautiful job of building our uncertainty and unease throughout the piece, especially when it comes to Eitan, who's the crane operator. I wonder if one of you could actually read aloud the short passage that depicts Duty and Eitan's first meeting.
Joseph, you will do it.
Okay, so if you could just tell me, I actually opened, since you mentioned that we'll want to do that, I actually opened up the excerpt on my browser. So you can just tell me like where you think I should start and when I should end and finish.
I believe that it's then, okay, so it starts with, and then a couple of weeks later. If that makes sense. And then.
Oh, okay, and then.
And to go to, now I have to respond. I do, thank you.
Okay, right, so it's like, okay. And then a couple of weeks later, when the crane isn't in operation, I hear someone shout from above, "Kid, you want something really good?" I look around because I don't know where that voice came from or who it was directed at. Suddenly, I see a hand waving from the crane operator's cabin window, and the voice yells, "This is me and this is you. There's no other conversation going on here. I can see that you're interested in my crane and I'd love to show it to you. The candy was just to get your attention." I'm excited by him addressing me and nod firmly. Slowly, the crane tilts in my direction and a thin, long chain descends from it. At the end of the chain is a bag tied up with a bow. The chain stops about 3 feet above me, and of course I can't get to it. "So, do you really want it?" he calls down. "If not, then I'm taking the candy back." Now I have to respond, I do, thank you."
Thanks so much, Joseph. This passage to me is just so powerful. I think I immediately wished I could just like shout to you, like, don't take candy from strangers. It's something that, you know, immediately you feel is kind of a setup for disaster. And I think that, when reading that, the reader feels like, is Eitan a potential sexual predator? It definitely seems to be sort of headed into that territory. But then I sort of realized as I kept on reading that maybe that suspicion is maybe kind of a red herring in a way, that it sort of misdirects us on purpose, that this quintessential setup sort of leads us to expect one thing, but it's also not that Eitan is not suspicious. It's just that maybe he's suspicious in a different way, and so it sort of just constantly keeps us on our toes.
By the way,
And
there was something that I thought about just now for the first time when I read this part out loud. I don't know if this was a connection, like an intentional connection on Miron's part or something that he thought of, but it kind of occurred to me, like the repeated mention of the candy. It kind of made me think of Alice in Wonderland and all the like eat this, eat that, and it's kind of fitting in the way that this is like the opening note in which Duty kind of dives into this rabbit hole of all the craziness that Eitan brings into his life. So there's something very interesting about that, like this kind of tempting but also dangerous thing that opens, brings you to a whole new world.
I think you can feel here that the gap between being very innocent and being very, I don't know if cruel, but dangerous for sure, is a very, very limited one, a very, very narrow one, very narrow one. And I think that all over this story, you feel on the edge, The wish to be furthermore can be very nice, can be very sweet, can be like sweets and chocolate, and can be very dangerous and can ruin families and can ruin human behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also liked, Joseph, what you mentioned too. I think that, Miron, you were talking about earlier, this sort of almost surreal or sci-fi element of the crane just being able to like you can easily imagine it's just sort of taking on a life of its own and like deciding to pick you up and toss you somewhere. And I think that that's also kind of really resonant with that Alice in Wonderland idea of sort of like surreal, like why does this guy happen to have this like little bag of candy with a perfect bow, just at that instant that Duty appears. So I definitely think that it has that kind of down the rabbit hole feeling to it. And Miron, I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit just about this character of Eitan and what he sort of represents for you.
You asked me because it was a little bit disconnected. I'm sorry. Can you?
Oh, sorry. Yes. No, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about this character of Eitan and sort of what his motivations are, and how they clash with reality, and give us some insight into his character.
Okay, now we'll be a little bit like the FBI. And Eitan is a man with a lot of experience. He worked also in Africa as a crane man. Here he works in Petah Tikva, which is a medium city not far away from Tel Aviv. Actually, in the beginning, you would think that he's limited to Petah Tikva, but you will discover through the story that he has cranes also in a very strategic points of Israel, near the seashore and all this. He has a lot of plans. On one hand, very personal one, that if he looks around and he sees something which is unjustified is being done, or something should be fixed, or cruel boys are torturing another boy, he will interfere through his crane and will try to fix it. But on the other hand, it is not limited to this. He thinks that he can be involved in a national scale, and that he has the right and the duty, maybe more than right, to put his personality there, his ability there, and to try to fix the world. Now, of course, on some level, it looks very childish. on another, and you ask for yourself sometimes, who is the real boy here? Is it the young boy or the grown-up boy? But from certain place, you feel that what he is doing can be more and more effective, and because of that, more and more dangerous. And in the end of the day, it will affect very much also the family life of the boy and his parents. And I must admit that family life is a subject that I am very much involved and very much interested in all my novels, also in my poetry, but we talk now more about novels. And I think that the most interesting scenes of life are happening at home. And here, Eitan is bringing to this house of innocent people, if we can call them, a lot of, I wouldn't call it a happiness, but a lot of energy and interest, but also an opening of a disaster.
Yes, absolutely. If that doesn't convince everyone, by the way, they should definitely read this full novel whenever they can. I do not know what will, so I definitely can see the seeds of that in this excerpt, and it's interesting to see how it will all come together. I also just want to ask, Joseph, I mean, I'm so intrigued by how you managed, you know, that suspense that we were discussing earlier, how you managed to sort of keep that in English translation, and you know, not have it sort of keep it so that it's not, maybe the threat isn't so overt, and keep that delicate balance that Miron had mentioned. And like, I know that when we were discussing the translation, we were thinking about how to make certain words that seemed, you know, translated literally into English as being, you know, maybe overtly indicating something. For instance, there was one point, I believe, where it was something about Eitan strokes Judy's head, and we thought, well, that seems to, this is some sort of like, you know, sexual abuse. Maybe we should go into more something like, he tussles my head, or he, you know, tussles my hair, or he does something like this, so it's a little bit more ambiguous. And then also just, I mean, one of the things that we discussed also was just how these characters of Judy and Eitan both have really unique voices, and to sort of how to keep that in the translation. So I'd love to hear about all of that.
I think about the first thing that you mentioned, I've actually been thinking a little bit about that since the last email that you sent, where you mentioned that like that might come up during the meeting. You talk about cultural differences and like, how do we keep the novel, how do I translate it into English, but I also keep it kind of Israeli feeling. And in conjunction with what you mentioned now about like trying to translate things like the ruffling hair, or these other moments that are sending up major red flags that this is a sexual predator, which is not supposed to be, which is not intended, because the novel doesn't intend to kind of have a portrayal, like a one-sided portrayal of Eitan as a villain. It's very murky and very so. What I was thinking about is maybe cultural differences kind of account for this difference in language also, because Israel, I mean, it's a really tiny country, and especially compared to the United States. So I think maybe it's characterized, you know, by very close-knit families and communities, and like kind of everything's smaller, everyone knows each other. Even in Petah Tikva, which is one of the bigger cities, it's not that small still. I mean, it's a city by Israeli standards, by US standards, it's probably like a tiny town. So I think maybe in that sense, maybe the whole situation with Judy and Eitan is something that, I don't know, we might take in stride more in Israel, and it might not make us as alarmed. Even Judy's parents, like, they're worried, but they don't instantly say something like, okay, this is it, you're not seeing this guy anymore. Right. Whereas, I don't know, in the United States, because it's so huge, and because children, you know, go missing so often and things like that, I kind of think that maybe you have to soften the language a little bit, because things that might fly in Israel, even if we kind of look at them sideways, like ruffling his hair, in the USA, there's no way that you can write that and you can still kind of keep Aidan in the gray zone as a character.
That's so interesting, and that makes complete sense to me. And so it's just really, I mean, it's just so interesting to think about how to approach that when you're a translator. So thank you so much. And I just want to remind everyone to me putting their questions in the chat or raising your hands. And in the meantime, as you're doing that, I just want to hand things over to Carol, who also would like to ask you a question.
Hi, Miron and Joseph.
Hi, good to see you.
You too. So the book came out in 2021 in Israel, I believe, in Hebrew, correct? And now we're in 2023 and, you know, same old, but also different, since with the pandemic and with various other things going on in Israel and around the world. I'm wondering, have events in the past 2 years affected your perception of the situation and how it appears in the book? Or do you feel that you said it the way you I mean, of course, you still stand by it, as you should. It's fantastic.
I would think that I felt when I wrote it how things are fragile, not only in Israel, but also in every human being life. And it's very surprising for me when I see people who are so certain in themselves and sometimes can be, very arrogant, which is something that I'm very afraid of, mainly when it comes from politicians or leaders. And here, I must say that some of the fears that I felt for years and are being told in this story through the story, in recent 1 or 2 years, became more and more obvious for me what is happening around, how people behave, how things that are hidden in our soul and consciousness are coming out in days of crisis, and suddenly you don't know from where it came, but the hole is there, and because of there, unexpected things are coming out of the hole in families, in private life, in societies, in the state of Israel, also in the state of America. And I think now about cranes, not only what I said before, but crane is something very massive, very big, but it's something that is a combination of few entities. Usually, you put to have a crane, you have to put together the parts of the crane, and it can be a small one or it can be a huge crane that is being built from few parts. And now I feel it more, that the crane is maybe even more good symbol that I thought in the past, that on one hand, we feel that entities in our life are very clear cut, but on the other hand, it happens to be that each entity is actually the combination of more and more parts. And there isn't any ultimate entity. Only as believers, I'm an observant Jew, only God. But otherwise, in human life, nothing is a comprehensive entity. All the time, parts and atoms and atoms. And now through the crane, I feel it more and more obvious.
So I think I agree with you. What you're saying is world events and Israeli events and everything else have made the themes and between the lines themes of the book even more relevant. And
yes, I think so. Also, this feeling of some people, sometimes they're right, but that they can fix the world. They know how to do it. We do not know. And they can take the responsibility for everybody to lead us through this journey.
Yes, I was actually just thinking about that, I mean, I don't know if, I read so many like opinion editorials or articles lately that keep coming back to the same theme that say things like both in Israel and in the world in general, that we live in an age of such instability. It's the pandemic, it's politics, everyone feels like there are constantly seismic shifts and nothing is stable and all of that. I don't know if it's true nowadays, like more than ever, but it certainly seems to be talked about now more than ever. People are feeling like the ground shaking under their feet all the time. And I think maybe in that sense, the vigilantism of Eitan as a character kind of becomes even more relevant now than 2 years ago when the book was written. Someone who kind of says like we can't trust the authorities, the people in charge and all of that, like to run things, I should go and do it myself, you know, and be a vigilante, and with all the, like the danger that carries.
Yeah, that is
Fascinating answers.
yes, I completely agree with all of that. And actually, I just wanted to mention, and I know we're nearing 1 o'clock, but just to quickly get some of the wonderful questions from everyone else here. Someone says that actually Eitan reminds them, this is Stu, Eitan reminds them of a Greek god playing with 2 humans, and Judy and the 2 other guys in the barrel in the soccer field. And I think that's also maybe an interesting insight in the sense of, I also definitely saw Eitan as this sort of like vigilante out of like sort of attempted aspiring superhero almost, in a sense. This is what actually happens when people try to take things in their own hands. It doesn't work. But then also I wonder what you guys think with this idea of the Greek god, because I feel that's actually kind of more chaotic and more almost like not something that's even trying to be necessarily benevolent, but just kind of human-like impulses on a godlike scale. So I wonder if that idea resonates with either of you.
There was something that I thought about. There's a little bit of that in the excerpt that was published. Also, the whole part where with at first with like scaring the children who were playing soccer, and then like worse with the thug and like grabbing him and trapping him and all of that. And there's more of that. I mean, and it's suffice to say, like without spoilers, it's not getting any better down the line. In this book, it just, you know, it gets pretty disturbing. And I think these are some of the most like beautifully written scenes also. And in that sense, also it was a challenge for me to translate correctly, because it's something that you mentioned, Becca, that it's a bit like artificial intelligence, or it feels like the crane comes to life and does things on its own. So I think what's really well, like really cleverly written in these scenes is that we're watching it through Duty's eyes. He narrates it, so he knows what's going on. He's not like one of the people on the street who are seeing the crane like seemingly come to life. Like, he knows what's going on. He knows why it's happening. And even then, the way it's written, it's still like terrifying to read it, and it still feels like, even though it's Duty watching it, it's still kind of described like a passerby seeing it. And I think these scenes they really like make us feel in a really visceral way like the danger of someone having this kind of power, as well-intentioned as he might be. And like you mentioned with that question, kind of like a god, you know, playing with people like they were pawns.
I think that with your translation, which I must praise, one of the basic things that was important for me was kept very well. That to deal with very dramatic issues, you don't have to write in dramatic way. You don't have to curse, you don't have to shout, and you can say very extreme and very problematic things in what seems to be a calm way. And this is the way that I feel the things. Don't shout them. They themselves are so strong and extreme that one would feel it even when it's being said in a very, very low way.
I've already sold the movie script, the script to the movies in my head, Miron and Joseph. So congratulations. But when I read that story, and I've read it many times now, I'm hearing ominous music.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe not super ominous because it has to be subtle, but that's
Yeah, I think it's really like I mentioned, like these scenes when the crane kind of comes to life and does whatever. These are probably like the most outright scary ones, but frankly, there's like this sense, this foreboding sense of danger that just keeps growing, and I think that's where Miron does such a fantastic job, kind of building it up throughout the novel. You're always kind of on edge, you know, like what's going to happen now.
and while Duty's parents care and they're concerned, it's more performative concern than actually getting right away involved and following up, which to me just adds to the terror.
Yeah, it's interesting that in a way, like the approach that they take, it's not instead of immediately like trying to cut Duty off from this obviously dangerous person. It's obvious that at least for a while they're like, okay, maybe we should humor him and kind of let this play out because, like, for all sorts of reasons, like maybe he needs this for his independence, and maybe it's better if we're involved because, like, if we forbid him from getting involved in it, he's probably going to do it anyway, and at least that way we can like keep an eye on it. Or there could be all sorts of reasons, but it's suffice to say that like you can see why he's like an unusual kid because his parents aren't very ordinary either.
Yeah. Oh, I hate to
A
end
mix
this
of
call.
clueless and clued in. That's frustrating.
Yes. Before we end things, unfortunately, I know that it is we're already getting a little bit over, and I feel like I could just keep on talking to you all for much longer than this. I want to ask you one more question from Kira, and she says that this is from Miron. She says that earlier you discussed both the potential and the danger of the crane, and I see the same tension of play in Aitan's character. He's a builder and also possibly a wrecker. I felt super nervous when I first encountered him on the page. Do you see, sorry, I got stuck. Do you see Miron, do you see Aitan and the crane as parallels?
That's a very good question. Uh, I think that the leader here is for sure, in this sense, Aitan, and not the crane. The crane is something, of course, much more than a symbol. It's something very practical, but he could maybe choose something else to implement his vision. Even though I must say again that crane includes in its character, if you can say a character of a crane, most of the elements that I think that are relevant for Aitan. But still, Aitan is the man to use it, to lead it, to initiate it. And the crane by itself is something for the mood, something as a symbol, something that gives him the possibility to be, to influence and so on. And it's true that there is some that they resemble each other. But on the other hand, I must admit, Aitan has also some soft character, some soft elements. He likes to help, even when he looks very cruel and dangerous. I'm not sure that he is aware of it. I'm not sure. And this is something, that is very dangerous by itself, that somebody is doing things and he is not aware of what he's doing. And he likes kids, and sometimes he wants to make Duty happy. And he doesn't understand that the way he makes him happy can embarrass him a lot towards his friends, towards the teacher. So he is somebody. And then in the story, you didn't reach it, but now you can read it. His son comes, the son of Aitan, and you see that his son is something that even developed from the character of his father, and not less complicated.
Thank you so much, Miron and Joseph. This was absolutely
you.
fascinating, and I thank everyone who has joined us today. If you'd enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to read more of Paper Brigade, we're posting the link to purchase the 2023 issue and the discount code again. I'd also like to encourage you to support us by becoming a JBC member. Our mission at Jewish Book Council is to educate and enrich the community through Jewish literature. We're a small nonprofit. And
Miron C.
from-
Isaacson, author.
Yes. And support from readers like you is crucial to our initiatives. The next meeting of Paper Brigade Short Story Club, which will also actually be the final meeting of the season, is with Gina Peffer Mulligan, the author of Land of Milk and Honey, on May 30th. You can also find a link to register for that in the chat as well. And I very much hope to see you there.
I'm very much impressed the way you prepared it, the way you relate to the novel and to us. And it's really something unbelievable. I really appreciate it from human point of view, from Hebrew point of view, and of course from literature point of view.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for the
much.
invitation. Thank you for everything.
We so appreciate you being here. So this was fascinating, a little sneak peek for us into more of it. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.